What is up, That Fit gang? Welcome back to another episode of That Fit podcast. It's been a while since we had a guest on, but we've got one in today, and super grateful to have him on. Obviously, a PT in the industry and been a PT for a while and a sports nutritionist. So today's guest is Tyler Hope. How you doing, bro?
I'm good, man. Good. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
That's right. What have you been up to?
I've been doing a lot of jiu-jitsu and working out at a UFC gym. That's my part-time thing. But as you said, sports nutritionist, mostly online.
Yeah.
So I work a lot from home, and I'm sure we all know from COVID, it gets a bit boring, or being in more communities goes a long way. So that's why I've gone back to some part-time face-to-face. It's good to be around more people. Yeah,
perfect. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate you coming on and obviously sharing your knowledge at everything that you've been through and stuff like that. So, I guess the first question is like, where did this all start for you? Where did getting into fitness begin for you?
It goes right back to high school. So I was actually, funny story that Kanye West influenced me to not go to uni with his College Dropout album. He had dropped that around that time, and I was year 11, kind of on my path towards engineering.
Yeah. What year was that?
Oh, shit, that was 2005? That's how old I am. I was in year 11 back then.
Yeah.
And, I remember I was listening to it, and I kind of started, my grades were dropping because I would go to the gym or go for a run instead of doing my study. Yeah. So I just like, the parts of the song where he's saying more about pursuing your passion. And also, David Dallas, he was Fort Minor? Yeah, I just can't remember what was the...
He's from New Zealand as well.
Yeah, he's a Kiwi rapper. I can't remember. He was a band with another DJ. Was it not Fort Minor? That's a different one. Frontline. Frontline. Yeah. And he was talking about how he was like an accountant or something like that, a web design degree dude, and he dropped out or finished it and pursued it. So, that kind of influenced me. Just go, fuck it, I'm going to pursue fitness.
Yeah.
And my mum had always said, try to use your head instead of your body. So I was like, fuck it, I'm going to do it. And so I was studying part-time on weekends. Back then it was Saturday, Sundays.
Yeah.
Kind of similar to the Cert 4 you're doing.
Yeah.
With booklets and stuff. And then, pretty much my English teacher helped me write my resume in year 12 because I was pretty much qualified.
Yeah.
And I applied during block exams, and they went in for a meeting, and then they're like, all right, cool. Like, you'll be a good fit. Can you start on Monday? And I was like, can I start the following Monday because I'm off to schoolies next week?
And how old were you at this
I was 17, yeah. So I literally, straight out of schoolies, started like my career.
Yeah. Where was schoolies at,
Yeah.
Where'd you go to schoolies?
I went to Airlie.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that was pretty cool because I'm from Cairns, so that was like kind of the next big spot. Yeah, so I got straight into it. Mind you, at 17, I looked like I was 15.
Yeah, just a baby face.
Yeah. And so I a lot of people didn't think I was qualified, or I thought I was still learning. So I just made it more of an effort to train more and study and reading magazines, because back then, internet.
That's all you had, eh?
Yeah, like Facebook was kind of coming up, and you had forums and stuff, but the information wasn't the same. So I took in a lot of bad information from those magazines as well.
What sort of magazines and stuff like that you hear, like T Nation? Were you a T Nation guy and stuff like that?
I used to go onto T Nation forums, but I just Muscle Mag. There was even there's the one that's just like Men's Health.
Yeah, that's a classic. I remember reading those a lot as well.
Yeah. So like looking back at it, I was like, fuck, there's a lot of shit information on there, and
looking back though, right? Because at the time you wouldn't have known any better, right?
No. Yeah. So that's like a thing now with social media. We see people posting all this stuff, and they're like new. I used to get angry, like, oh, you stupid idiot. But then I'm like, end of the day, they just want to help people. They're posting content and putting themselves out there. So like, I don't get so angry about it.
Well, I guess you would know that as like, I remember being there as well. Like, obviously you weren't posting on Instagram and stuff like that because it wasn't around, but knowing like, you were just trying to help people as well. So any information that you're taking on, you're like obviously putting on to your clients is trying to help them as well. So that's quite tough. That's quite a tough thing to navigate.
Yeah. So back in the day, a lot of the gyms would hire a PT to be on the gym floor for several hours. So if people weren't booking in for their measurements to be done or free programs, because they could get like a new program every 6 weeks and stuff as part of the membership.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so they could book in. So it would be like a 4.5 hour kind of thing in the morning or afternoon. And if there weren't bookings, you would just go around and talk to members, help spot them or wipe down machines and stuff like that. So that was a pretty good system to develop really good rapport with members because they could book in for free and stuff. So eventually it was like really easy to go, like buy 3 PT sessions and build up from there. But I remember in some of those consults where I'm like, all right, just don't want to eat too much fruit because the sugar's going to make you fat. And I was like, I have nightmares about it sometimes.
It's so funny looking back on now. I can imagine it's like, oh my God.
Yeah, I remember like, someone like, I can't have watermelon. There's too much sugar. I was like,
I remember that too. I just remember hearing about the fructose and stuff like that. I was like, oh, fuck, that's so bad. Yeah.
So I have nightmares about it now, but I just wanted to help people. So that's pretty much the main thing.
Yeah. So do you remember your first day?
Nah.
Being a PT?
No.
Do you remember your like first, I guess, months or year and stuff like that? Like, how did you go about like navigating that? Because you would have been. It's quite hard. It's like you're starting your like first job and stuff like that. It's really hard to obviously present yourself in a way that's like, I feel like I can help a lot of people even though you're new to the industry. Like how did you go about like trying to build a client base and trying to, get your name out there and get as many clients as you could?
Yeah, well, it was a bit easier because people would book in on my shift. Yeah. And sometimes I would just book in with whoever. So that allowed me to get more experience off the bat. So, but I remember from the start, I'll be like, hey, I'm quite new, but I'm going to run you through it, ask away any questions.
Yeah.
If I don't know, I'll find out for you.
Okay.
And that was like the common thing. And because I had told people from the get-go, one, I obviously looked young.
Yeah.
And I would just tell them that. And then sometimes I didn't know. So I'd go off and research it and try to find it.
Yeah.
And I think it ended up really being in my advantage, just saying, hey, I'm not that new, but I'll find out these answers for you and figure it out. And, I ended up getting a really big base back in Cairns at Genesis many, many years ago. Yeah,
is that still in Cairns? Is that still a...
Yeah, it's kind of faded now. They've like sold it and branched off, but there was like... They had like 5 different clubs at the point of the time there.
Yeah.
When I was there co-managing with Alex, he was like one of my first mentors.
Yeah.
Big Yugoslavian Russian looking dude. Yeah. So he taught me a lot of like West Side barbell kind of old school powerlifting stuff. So I kind of was already getting into powerlifting at that time as well, from football. And I was at 18, 19. I did like 2-3 comps.
Yeah.
I competed in IPF equipped because back then there wasn't really raw.
Yeah.
So it was like capo, and the stigma with capo was like a bunch of bikies and stuff like that. So I did the IPF, and it's pretty funny that I bombed my bench because I was watching Westside Barbell and they had their heels up, but IPF is heels have to be flat.
Okay. Is that for all competitions?
I'm pretty sure
does it change between competitions?
Yeah, different federations have different rulings. So IPF...
Do you want to run through some of those? That's quite interesting, like the differences between the federations and stuff like that.
Yeah, there's actually been a bunch of other changes right now with IPF with arching. I don't know if you've just seen that. They talked about like you can't arch so much.
Okay.
So if you arch so much that when...
How do they monitor that?
It's something to do with when the bar hits the chest, the elbows still have to go below the shoulder.
Oh, okay.
So that's how they measure it, because I'm sure you've seen some of those like exorcism bloody bench.
Sure. Someone's going to break their back for sure doing that.
Yeah. So IPF, I don't know whether they've changed it, but at the time you had to have your heels flat. And I remember I'd be watching Westside Barbell stuff where they would have the heels up, which is a way that you can normally arch a lot higher because you can kind of get more pelvic tilt and it makes it a lot easier. So I remember I was 18 at like 80 kilos and I squatted like 190 and then I bombed out on my bench.
Yeah.
And then I deadlifted, I think 210 or something. And then being in that weight class I actually still got like second place because it was a small comp. Like normally you would bomb out, but because I missed my bench and it was in like a small one, they're like, oh, you still do your deadlift and we'll put your score together.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was funny because I still got second place with my big squat and bench. So it was pretty funny. But it was a big learning curve doing that. And then they're all the federations in powerlifting now because you got GPC over here. That's who I used to compete with, or in my last like powerlifting years. You got capo, which is like another kind of raw. They all kind of vary with raw as well because you got sleeves and then some of them allow knee wraps.
I see that.
So they all vary in that as well. But normally when they say equipped, it's like some kind of suit where it has like extra. It's almost like Kevlar kind of super tight.
Yeah. Well, what does a suit help in some
it just
sort of
add
way?
Like it's like adding kind of like elastic bands to your outfit.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's like super thick. So
yeah, right.
Like, and I don't know if you've seen like the guys with the bench shirts, and they're like really tight in the middle and stuff like that. Yeah, so I remember it used to take me like 15 minutes to get into my bench shirt.
Really?
Yeah, I used to have like plastic bags and put a hole in it so I could like slide it up.
So it's like kind of putting on like a wetsuit or something like that.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Holy shit.
Yeah, so that was it was very interesting, but I'm pretty glad now that equipped or how it is now raw, it's a lot easier and it makes a little bit more sense.
Okay. Because how did you first get into powerlifting? Like, was it people that you saw, you're like, oh, I could give that a go? Like, what sort of pushed you in that direction? Because when you first started training, was it to build muscle or was it to get strong? Yeah,
so I'm playing rugby league. I was pretty small and I played hooker. But then sometimes we didn't have enough players because sometimes we didn't have people off the bench. Shout out to Ivanhoe's back in Cairns. So sometimes they would have to throw me into second row, and I'm like 60 kilos. But I used to just tackle, and I was really fit. So after a while, I got sick of kind of getting slung around and getting bashed up a bit. So I started getting into weights to get stronger and bigger. Yeah, that's how it started, and it kind of just transitioned to powerlifting, and that was more from my old mentor Alex. He had a bit of a background of it, and he used to train over in America in like Gold's Gym over in Venice Beach and stuff. So he was pretty old school. So that's how I kind of got into it, and I did like 3 comps, and then I kind of transitioned into bodybuilding from that because I wanted to look more into nutrition to perform better. And then as I started eating better and my physique changed, I kind of just got hooked on that. Yeah. So that's how I got into that when I was 21.
Shit, that's quite young.
Yeah. So
I guess they're getting younger and younger now.
Yeah. Yeah, so when I was 21, I did like 4 comps that year in bodybuilding, and I had done 3 powerlifting comps in the like 2 years before that. So I had already competed a fair bit then. Yeah.
Well, let's go down that bodybuilding route. So going down there, down obviously that channel, like it's very disciplined, it's very I guess it's a different lifestyle, especially bodybuilding and stuff like that. But what has sort of bodybuilding taught you about lifestyle? What's good about it and what's not so good about it?
Having like routine and becoming efficient at everything, like efficient with cooking, and then like just planning out my days with whatever my training is. And I would always just make it fit, because it's not always about having the best session. It's just kind of getting it done. There are parts of your training where you want to have great sessions, hitting PRs and stuff like that. But the big thing with powerlifting is routine, week in, week out, meal by meal kind of thing. So that structure is great. And it was also like a vice for me as well in periods of my life, like just having structure. I mean, you're a bit down or whatever, you just get back to it and keep doing the same shit until things change. But the downside is your reality of what's lean or body image gets really distorted. Yeah. So there's like a pressure kind of on that. 1, on yourself, but 2, how you like view others as well. Yeah.
And what do you mean by that?
Just more of the fact of like how lean they could get kind of thing. Like obviously stage lean is not healthy and you don't want to be there for a long period of time. But when I was still learning and I was kind of in that phase, I was still thinking like you could be healthy and lean. Yeah. But that was also because I was under the idea I was still eating heaps of vegetables and protein. Yeah. So I was like sick. I didn't eat much fruit because I thought it would make me fat. But so that kind of thing that you would view people. Obviously now there's a lot more people talking or promoting about healthy kind of weight and dad bods and stuff like that.
100%.
But it's also like my perception, I guess, a little bit of like what I was attracted to with females as well. Like I like thick girls, but just sometimes just getting leaner and holding that kind of thing. Yeah. That can change a lot with that person. So that can end up starting to be stress on women trying to be that lean all the time. I'm sure that happens a lot with Instagram and stuff these days as well. Yeah,
for sure. And it's, how do you because obviously there's a lot of people that come and want to do shows and stuff with you, and you coach them through that. How do you manage those sort of expectations of like body image when they do get like super lean and stuff like that? How do you sort of coach them and help them understand like, hey, we're not going to be here for a long time, but like, how do you manage those expectations?
Well, I think it just comes down to setting it from the get-go.
Yeah.
Like when I have a chat with someone, like I'm really picky now with who I take on with bodybuilding, and I avoided it for a period of time when my passion with it really had died, but it's kind of coming back.
What sort of, when you say picky, like what sort of things are you looking for in a client or something like that you're like, okay, I can work with you?
Yeah, so I kind of tell them like they need to do at least like 6 months with me.
Okay.
Kind of coaching, and we do like somewhat a building phase, and during that building phase, making sure we're having consistent weeks, and having those habits and that routines in place. It's not like super hot where anyone can diet super hard for 4 weeks.
Yeah.
You know, and then once everything starts to set in, and you know that metabolic adaptation and hunger and everything really starts. It's that 5, 6, 7 weeks where people really can change. So that's a reason why I set that expectation. They've got to do a period of time of kind of building and just having habits and building on that. And I also try to make sure that like that phase is also built on health. And I'm trying to get them at like their metabolic rate up. That's probably a bad way of saying it, but increasing their carbs and food. So they're eating a whole lot more. So for an example, the bikini girl, Heather, that I'm prepping at the moment, her normal days are ranging between 200 and 300 grams of carbs, and she's 2 weeks out from show.
Okay, yeah.
And she's on, I think it was 435 carbs on like her refeed day.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and she's 58 kilos.
That's crazy. That's really good.
And it's because we had a good off season and kind of built everything up.
So is that what creates a good dieting like phase or something like that?
Yeah.
Is having a good off season, building up that metabolic rate, or getting like food into them and having a good growth phase?
Yeah. Yeah, I totally believe that is so. And it's also just having them used to having high carbs, you know, having the food going through, almost like training your stomach to be able to digest all the food.
Yeah.
I think that's another thing as well. I'm sure you've done some bulking stuff before, and you get to a point where you're like just sick of eating.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, so you're kind of like pushing through those phases, I think, really set your body up.
Yeah. Okay. So obviously there's that point. So how do you structure a dieting phase for someone? Like say someone wants to, let's just, obviously we're coming into summer. How do you
summer.
Hot boy summer. It's a boy's turn this year. It's not hot girl summer. It's hot boy summer. Yeah. So the boys are taking over this year. Say if they want to come to you and like, hey man, I want 6, 8, 12 weeks of dieting to get absolutely shredded for summer. Like how do you go about getting someone to that point?
So I kind of always like to look at 4-week blocks with dieting. And I do like to be aggressive off the bat.
Yep. Why is that?
One, because you're more invested at the start. You're more motivated. So you're probably more willing to...
Psychologically, you're in a good space.
Yeah, you're ready to diet. And also, like, some of those adaptations with your hunger and that haven't really set in yet. So I like to be aggressive from the start. And then from that... So they'll normally be like the first 2 weeks would be aggressive. And then I'd back off a little bit. Maybe go back to maintenance and see how they are. And then go back to that deficit. So it's almost, it depends on how well they respond, but it would be kind of aggressive for 2 to 4 weeks.
Okay. Yeah.
And then I'll have like a diet break-ish week.
Yeah. But
it does depend on the person and their time frame. Because if it's 6 weeks, honestly, I'll
just pushing them hard for 6.
I'll just kind of get them to grind it through. Yeah. And it's not ideal.
Yeah.
Maybe in the middle there, have like 4 or 5 days where it's kind of back at maintenance.
Yeah.
Because like, even though people believe, or the idea of like a refeed day helps bring up your leptin and reduce your ghrelin, but one day doesn't really do a whole lot.
Make a huge difference, yeah.
Yeah. So they try to promote like diet weeks.
Yeah.
But sometimes your time frame doesn't really permit that. I've seen some success with like 4 or 5 days.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just more that mental break as well.
Yeah. So if someone's doing it for 12 weeks, well, how long are people dieting for like a show? Or does it depend?
It depends, obviously, on how lean they already are.
Yeah.
I personally used to like start cutting 30 weeks out from a show.
Okay.
But I would purposely have in that 30 weeks, there would be like in the middle there'll be like a 4-week period where I kind of do like a maintenance.
Yeah.
And then I would also plan to have, whether it was like weddings and stuff.
Yeah.
Where I'd have my social events where I could have a little bit of a blowout.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So going from someone that's already been training for a while to someone that's like just gym pop and has a lot of weight to lose, like how are you sort of helping them, say they want to lose like 10, 20 kgs over a year? How do you sort of go about like creating habits for them? Because someone like that, it's about getting them moving and getting good nutrition habits. Like what sort of things are you ingraining in them to help them get to where they need to go, especially with someone that has a lot of weight to lose?
Yeah, so I like to, again, kind of be aggressive off the bat, and it'll bring at least kind of 8-week block of cutting, and then I like to do maintenance after that, whether it's 4 to 8 weeks afterwards. Again, this is more looking at the big picture of like 20 kilos over, over a year. They can possibly still lose body fat or body comp in that maintenance phase, and that's what I try to tell them and set that expectation that when we do that, because sometimes people like they're on a roll and they don't want to back off, or they're also, people that have that are pretty big and then they've lost weight, they get really scared of putting it back on, so they get they get scared of maintenance phases. And it's also that number at maintenance seems like bulking numbers to them as well, and that's I guess false information or that they've seen before. So kind of setting that expectation of that's how it's going to be.
Yeah.
So it's kind of 8 weeks, and then they'll have a maintenance of 8 weeks, and pretty much kind of alternate from that. But again, it depends on how well they're moving, because sometimes people like it just keeps the fall off. It falls off. So I kind of ride that wave, and then when things start to slow down, we may start the maintenance phase earlier, because like, hey, you've already achieved 5% of your body drop. Let's go back to maintenance for a little while, get your strength up, focus on your strength, and try to change the focus to performance goals, not just all physique.
Yeah.
Because the numbers in the scale will jump up and down.
Yeah.
But if they're getting stronger, if they're getting fitter, 500 meter row is getting better, or 1K runs. I like to do short fitness testing as well.
Okay. Yeah.
It's easy. Like it's you don't have to hype yourself up too much to do like a 2-minute row where you can just bust it out.
Yeah. Okay, so your cardiovascular sort of like short testing, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, I like to have that, and then primarily strength training.
Yeah.
So still push for that for people that are looking for weight loss, that keep the cardio short, sweet, which is good for their cardiovascular health, and then just general walking. So I think walking is very underestimated for weight loss, fat loss, and I'm a huge advocate of like 10-minute walks.
Okay, yeah.
So Stan Efferding, who was...
Are you a 10K person? You always hear like get 10K steps and stuff like that.
No, I hate it how people just say that, but it just comes down to what that person normally does. Like I've got a client, he's a social worker, so he's often running around with the kids and stuff. Right. So he'll get like 15,000 steps some days on purpose. So there's other days where he's not working. I'm like, you just sit down.
100%.
Yeah. So I set like weekly targets. So on my spreadsheet, it automatically calculates their week total. So I set them a weekly goal, because sometimes you have a day where you're running errands and running around, and you have one of those days where it's freaking 10, 15,000 steps. So there's no point for you forcing some other days to be at a certain target.
Yeah, okay.
But obviously knowing what your average should be for the day. But going back to the 10-minute walks, that was a huge part of my last bodybuilding prep in 2018. I think my last DEXA scan 2 weeks out, I was 6.1%. So I got, and that was a DEXA scan too. So like I was dick skin shredded. Like I had veins everywhere, and I was literally doing 10-minute walks 3-4 times a day, and then my weights. And I would do it like, I'd wake up and just do one straight away. I lived in like a little resort, so it was like pretty nice to do like this nice 10-minute loop. And then I'd eat breakfast, and then normally go to work, but I would get there 10 minutes early and then do like a blocky around the place. And then after lunch, I would do a 10-minute walk, and then in the afternoon. But that accumulates to 40 minutes of cardio.
Yeah.
So like instead of sitting on a treadmill bored, hating my life doing cardio, like it just broke it up and it made it really manageable.
Because how much cardio did you end up doing for that prep? Like were you doing over like an hour and a half?
That was the most that I did was like the 4-10 minutes.
Yeah.
But mind you,
see a lot of people doing a lot of cardio. Some people like doing up to an hour and a half.
Yeah. Yeah, I hated cardio because one of my original bodybuilding preps, like my coach was like getting me and telling me to do an hour in the morning, an hour at night, like walking. And I remember sitting on a treadmill on an incline because that's the other thing. You got to have it on your incline. Yeah. Mind you, I was still holding on, so it kind of defeated the whole point of being on incline. Yeah. I remember having my eyes closed and I'm like crying.
Is incline burning more calories though?
Well, it would be if you're not holding on because it's like walking up a hill. Yeah. But once you hold on, you take out that element of having to fight against the incline. So holding on just negates it.
Yeah.
But I remember literally just holding on, like crying, so hungry, and I was like on 1200.
How many weeks out were you at this point?
Well, for that one, I had only planned to do one show, and then another show popped up earlier that a friend was going to in Sydney.
So you had to jump on as well.
So I went a little bit earlier, yeah. So I went to that one then. That was the New South Wales titles. That was my first ever show when I won bantamweight division, 68 kilos. 68. And then I won the junior. So
where did you start that dieting phase at?
I can't remember that one. That one was all over the place. Like I had no idea what I was doing and I didn't really track any metrics.
Did you have a coach at that point?
I hired a coach like 6 weeks out because I was going to do it. And then I had some other people. I was like, actually, I should just get a coach to make sure I'm peaking properly.
Yeah.
Well, that was my thoughts and making sure I get my peak week right.
Yeah.
Which I've now later on realized what I did do was like all wrong and not necessary. But with that one, my season ended up dragging out to being like across 10 weeks because I won, I got invited to the Asia Pacific. So I did this. Right. Then my second show was the one in Townsville I was hoping originally doing. And then I had another show several weeks later. And then I got third place at that. Then I got invited to do the Worlds over in Vegas. I was like, sick. This is another 4 weeks I get to go have a holiday.
Yeah.
But by the end of it, I was mentally so cooked. Yeah. Like my poor girlfriend at the time, I hadn't like had sex with her for like 10 weeks as well. Like my libido was crushed.
Yeah.
And I was literally just like having some oats and whey for breakfast with like a few berries. It was like 20 grams of berries. And then it was just
poverty cows.
And it was just bassa and asparagus. Like that was pretty much the rest of my meals and it was horrible. It was like was it the fish and rice cake guy?
Yeah. Fish and rice cake.
Yeah. And that killed me.
So with obviously going from comp to comp, like is that quite normal going from like if you win something you go to something else that's like really close in terms of like weeks?
I think the structure with bodybuilding now in Australia, there are a lot more closer together. Like you'll probably even see like there's a heap of shows like bang, bang, bang. So like at the moment now there was a few on and the next 4 or 5 weeks you'll probably just see every weekend there's a bunch of shows on. So I think they structure it a bit better now where there may be only a few. And dieting super hard for comp. I think it was 10 weeks between my first and last show that year is another reason why I'm big on telling people like you got to have your time frame of what you're dieting to. If you happen to not hit your weight by that period of time, you still got to stop and go to maintenance because you need to see the light at the end of the tunnel when you're dieting. And if you get that goal or not, you can look back and reflect on what do I need to do to make sure I achieve it next time. But that's where I think a lot of people fail because then they kind of get close, they binge, have a bit of a blowout. Yeah. But they're like, I didn't get to so-and-so weight. So then they diet harder again for a few more weeks. And then something else comes up, socially, whatever. And then this turns into this thing that they're trying to get to that weight for 6 months.
Yeah.
And they're in this kind of cycle and they're just having more metabolic adaptation. Yeah. They're not having, really hard progressive training. And they're just kind of spinning their wheels.
Yeah. Because that's very true. I think a lot of people do that, right? Especially like how we're just talking about summer, like I want to get in shape for summer, but they don't quite get there. And then that whole summer, 3-4 months of the year, they're like going back and forth, like yo-yo dieting and stuff like that. That's a really good point actually. And it speaks to obviously when you're going through those shows and stuff like that, like what's the trade-off? Because obviously a lot of people see it on like Instagram and it like looks good, they're absolutely shredded, but like what is the payoff of getting to those sort of like...
What do you mean the payoff of like
what the sacrifices and like what do you? Because a lot of people say, "Oh, you're shredded," like that's a plus, like cool. But what is on the dark side? Because no one ever really speaks about it as much. Like, what is the dark side of being
the dark side is like being infatuated with food. I remember like I got into watching like Matt Stoney and some of these like professional eaters.
Oh yeah,
just
because that's right.
It just kind of
the hot dog eating competition
yeah, 100%. And I just like would start focusing and watching stuff like that because I was like obsessed with just food, but I also had to be deprived or restricted from it. But then I wasn't spending time like maybe studying or learning more.
Yeah, right.
It was like I'm just trying to do things to fill this void of thinking because food is fuel for life.
Yeah.
Like people say, oh, I hate having my life evolve around food. I'm like, that's life.
Yeah.
Like it just depends on where you're looking at it through a lens of restriction and I can't touch this to what am I eating to serve my day, whether it is to feel better or, change my physique or just simply feel good. And I think a lot of people underestimate food as how we feel good, whether it's sharing with people or just literally what we get from it.
Because that's the other thing is like, how have people like come to that point, of seeing food as, obviously it can be quite emotional for a lot of people and stuff like that. But what do you think has started to like cause that difference? Because food has always been fuel, but what has sort of caused it to become like sort of a vice and stuff like that?
I think a big thing with people kind of, whether it's like eating disorders and stuff, like they feel down. And whenever you eat food, and I'm pretty sure chocolate itself, you get serotonin and dopamine at the same time. So people, you could even talk about self-sabotage in there, but end of the day, it's like you were feeling down, whether you're tired or you're emotional, depressed. And this is a quick kind of drug that makes you feel better.
Good for the time, yeah.
And even if it is short-lived, there's a part of that. And this is actually really interesting because I've done a lot of like research into mindset and stuff. And a big thing is like for people learning how to release judgment of themselves. Because if we don't release judgment, we end up in this cycle of kind of abusing ourselves or being angry. When someone has a moment like that, when they give in and they eat something and they go, how could you? You're so stupid. Yeah. It's like, if you look back at that person at that moment or that side of you, that just wanted you to feel better. That is somewhat a side of you trying to nurture you to feel better because you felt bad.
Yeah.
Just it wasn't done in the right way.
Yeah.
So when you can release judgment of that side of you and just go, okay, they wanted me to feel better. I want to feel better. I just need to do it in a better way that actually goes towards my goals or just my health in general.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So how do you get someone to switch that mind frame?
I think it's just having the conversation about it.
Yeah.
And when things have been ingrained over time, it's really hard. I can't just tell you, hey, do this now. It's ingrained in, but I think just more the time they're exposed to hearing it and talking about it, it comes around. Because I do get girls who have like eating disorder problems hit me up. And it's not really... It's kind of outside my scope of practice because I'm not a psychologist. Whatever.
But it can always help in a certain way, right?
Yeah. I just tell them like, hey, like this isn't my niche. You may need someone at a higher level of help, but I'm more than happy to get started with you. Yeah. Put these in the direction. And if there are some really big red flags that I think is outside my control, then we can push you that way. So at least you're moving in the right direction.
Because it's always more like someone just doesn't create something like that just by thinking there's other things in their life that are going on that may cause that. So I think it's getting, understanding what's going on in other areas of their life to be like, maybe it's not that, maybe you're just going out, like break up with a boyfriend or something like that. There's always so much more than what they say. I guess they say they have, you know what I mean? It always has to come from some sort of place.
Yeah. And I think the big thing that shocks a lot of people, it's actually just having support. Having
this connection. A lot of people just don't feel a connection, so they try to find a connection to something else.
Yeah, and like I know it can sound lame, but having someone be like, "Oh, I'm proud of you, well done,"
like it goes a long way. Even
especially we're in a day of society where a lot of people have parents with split marriages and stuff, so things are complicated there. So they don't kind of get that support so much. So yeah, it's I could say it's sad, but it's just a bit of a reality where there are some times where people that had like some women have like eating disorder stuff and they chat to me and I say, hey, just get the cycle, like your routine, whatever. And we just keep repeating that cycle. And then it just slowly diminishes out. And just because I had someone like, hey, Like, you're doing well. Or they made a mistake, it's okay, but we need to do A, B, and C to be better. And it works.
Yeah, for sure. And that's because you brought up a point, it's like connection and stuff like that, and someone to talk to, and someone that can be like, hey, like, I'm proud of you and stuff like that. And I saw something the other day that you were talking to a guy who's doing like men's mental health and stuff like that. So that, like, that's another interesting thing is like through like your bodybuilding, powerlifting and stuff like that, especially bodybuilding, like I think it can cause, like, obviously you're talking about like connection with food and stuff that different. Like, did you have any like times and stuff where you're like, it was quite tough, like mentally?
Yeah. As in competing or just around food?
Competing and stuff in general.
Yeah, there was a period of time in 2014. I had planned to compete, and I had some time off, and it was the first time I really done some like big bulks and stuff.
Yeah,
and around that time, my mum got diagnosed with lung cancer. So I was like trying to deal with kind of helping look after her.
Yeah.
We couldn't really do much anyway because it was already so large. So just more her and palliative care and just entertaining her.
Yeah.
So just kind of balancing with that. There was a period of time where it was really healthy for me because I had my routine, structure, and I'll do that. And I would schedule time when I would go see her and have my meals where it was really sweet.
Yeah.
And I was managing that all. But after a while, I kind of burnt out.
Yeah.
And then it became a thing where I would not want to eat pizza when we were watching the football. But it was like this kind of thing where that kind of just became a habit and routine where it was just easy just to say, oh, no, I can't do that.
Yeah.
And it became to a way, because when you're competing, sometimes you just have to avoid social situations because people are annoying or trying to put food down your mouth. So it's just easier to avoid it. And I do believe after kind of competing, I just got used to avoiding it anyway because it was easier not dealing with people. Like, even though I wasn't like off season, but I was still trying to kind of eat and stuff. So I became to a way like I would isolate myself a lot, which then that later on turned into developing like depression and shit like that.
Yeah.
And so I think, again, this goes back to understanding what you should be doing in your different phases, where I was still like trying to clean bulk, so I wouldn't eat pizza and shit like that. But so I was pretty much still mentally drained from not being in social situations and stuff. So that's where it became quite toxic.
Yeah.
Whether that's a term.
Yeah, 100%. And that's, I think, especially now, you only have a certain amount of energy. How you're talking about it, it's like you only have a certain amount of mental energy going back into that environment is just going to drain you even more, which is really interesting. Like, so what sort of, because obviously now you haven't done any bodybuilding and stuff like that. Are you going to go back to bodybuilding? How do you sort of live your life now in a more healthier way, I guess, and that is conducive to the lifestyle that you try to live?
Yeah, so I did actually completely stop lifting for a period of time because I was just balls deep into jiu-jitsu. So I was just doing that. You know, I was doing 6 to 10 classes a week and just doing that all the time. But recently I'm trying to get that balance between it. I'm trying to lift 4 days a week and do jits 4 days a week. Okay. And then from there I'm hoping to get back to doing more jits.
Yeah.
There's just nothing sucks more than after doing some leg days and then you're going to jits and dude's trying to push on your legs, digging his elbows in, and he's breaking your guard and passing your guard because you're sore. It's not because your guard's that shit, even though mine is pretty shit. But so that's how I'm trying to balance it and still be like going out and eating socially a few times a week. So I go through phases of also where I'll track for just like a day or two, and then I won't track at all.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so like I have kind of vague, because I'm competing in jiu-jitsu, but it's like just regionally. Yeah. I'm not trying to go to nationals or anything. So obviously fuel and nutrition goes a long way to be able to just recover and keep coming back. So I'll just track some days here and there, just make sure that I'm getting enough in, because I've always kind of struggled to eat enough.
Okay, yeah.
I'd say I'm more of an ectomorph body type. I was always quite skinny.
Same, actually, yeah.
So as soon as I start eating more, like my hunger starts to crash as well.
Oh, right,
yeah. So I need to make sure that I'm getting enough in, and I gotta once I track for, I'm like, fuck, okay, I need another 500 calories, and then I'll go back to making sure I increase that portion. So that's kind of how I manage that at the moment. But to be honest, it's a bit over the place.
Yeah, because how did you get into jiu-jitsu? Because like you hear it a lot now, it's real big. Like just people find it really inspiring. There's just something about it. Like I don't know that much about jiu-jitsu, but what about jiu-jitsu is like so intriguing and like makes you want to keep coming back? Because a lot of people do it now.
Yeah, it's highly addictive.
Yeah, what's so addictive about it?
End of the day, it's like each time you go, like it's literally like you're one-on-one fighting someone, but it's a lot safer where you're not getting punched in the face. Like you're wrestling, so you can you can still go ham and not get injured as much. Touch wood, I've had a few ruptures and stuff, but that I think that's a part of it. But it's also there are so many layers to it. It's like physical chess, like certain grips and certain angles and different positions, and there's many different variations due to that person's his levers are longer and shorter, or he's heavier or lighter. Yeah. So there's multiple scenarios and ways. So as you start getting into it, few of the puzzle pieces start to make sense, and it's literally like an art through physical exertion. So that's kind of that part of it.
Yeah.
I got into it originally back when I was 18, when I kind of was transitioning from powerlifting into bodybuilding. I started training a little bit because I was watching UFC. And this is back in the day when like it was like jiu-jitsu guys were killing it. And it was like they started taking out a lot of the strikers. So I started training for a bit then. And I literally came to like a crossroad where I was going to do my first bodybuilding comp, and I was like 8 weeks out, and I was struggling to, because I was dieting, still trying to do it all, and I was like, and I got offered to take on an MMA fight. Was not ready.
I was a full-on MMA fight.
Yeah, because we had been doing a little bit, but like this is back, 2010 kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't that big. So they were just like anyone who was kind of interested, they'll like just line you up and have a crack. And because I had a Muay Thai fight earlier that year because I was in the corner for my friend and I had been training a little bit of Muay Thai. And then a guy didn't show up. So I like borrowed someone's box and I had my mouth guard in the car and I jumped in the ring and had a fight. They just kind of called it like an exhibition one. But like, we were throwing hands and kicking and shit. And so I was kind of going down that path then. And it just came to the point where like I have to give up this and just focus on bodybuilding 100% if I wanted to do well. And one of the reasons why with that as well, as I got busier as a PT, 5:30, 6 p.m.
Those time slots were getting taken up.
Yeah, everyone wants to book in then, and that's when normal classes would be on, so I was making it to jiu-jitsu less. So it was a lot easier for me to fit my training around my clients in that schedule, or I'll just slot it in. So that's kind of the transition with that, but let alone me changing my physique. And another reason why I competed so much is like it's a direct reflection of what I can apply in my knowledge, and it would hopefully give me, a higher reputation as a coach.
Because obviously bodybuilding is a huge discipline. Like, what did you learn through doing like so many bodybuilding shows? Like, what is it about bodybuilding that? What sort of habits do you have to develop like in order to be successful?
It's just like pre-planning.
Yeah.
Like with your food and just scheduling, like making sure you have some kind of roster. Well, I guess if you were purely just bodybuilding, it doesn't matter because you got more time in the day. But if you're like trying to run a business and do that stuff,
I guess that context, like from running a business, like what sort of habits do you have to develop if you're still doing those like other things?
It just came to like just time management and delegating that, and then just not procrastinating so much. And I think it comes back to just like whenever you cook a meal, like you just want it to be suffice.
Yeah.
It's got your protein, it's got some kind of flavor, but it may not be that delicious, and it hits whatever other metrics you need, whether it's your fat or your carbs or veggies. So, and then just having everything where you just get it done. It doesn't need to be amazing, and it's just getting good at just doing small tasks all the time.
Yeah,
that was probably the best skill.
Yeah. So between the three, powerlifting, bodybuilding, and jiu-jitsu, like, what's your favorite? And if you could only do one for the rest of your life, like, what would it be?
Oh, man. I'm just going to say
they all offer different things, right?
Yeah, 100%. Like, jiu-jitsu is awesome, and I'm going to be biased to it because that's what I choose to do now. I loved, like, powerlifting was fun because, like, on the day, everyone's just egging each other on and having a good time. And, like,
they're all different. Yeah, they're really all different environments and communities. They're all built different.
Yeah. So when you're, like, even if I'm competing, like, someone who's going to possibly beat me, we're still cheering each other on because end of the day, they have to make that lift or not. I'm not going to kind of really psych them out so they don't get their lift. I'm sure some people have kind of
there's people do that at comps?
There are some people that...
Surely.
I think some people just, like, zone out so much themselves.
Yeah.
Maybe... I haven't personally seen someone try psych someone else out.
Powerlifting community just doesn't really seem like that, are they? They're pretty all together. Like, they all want each other to do well.
Yeah, for sure. And I think... that's why the sport is growing. I would say jiu-jitsu and powerlifting are probably like the two biggest, fastest growing sports currently of this day and age.
That's crazy.
And jiu-jitsu is like really supportive. Like you have like your family, like, and the reason why it's like you develop such great bonds with everyone is because there's so much trust that you have with each other because you're literally almost killing each other. Like you're literally putting on chokeholds where like I've gone to sleep a few times and stuff as well. Like there's literally an element where you are going hard with someone but you trust them to not kill you or physically disable you for your life. So that's why you develop such good bonds, kind of pushing people to that limit.
Yeah, that's such a good point because trust is a big thing just in general, like in everyday life, being able to have the right people around you and like being able to trust the people that they're going to do the right job or whatever. So I guess it teaches a lot about life in general, I guess.
And another thing, like with life in general, like you learn from jiu-jitsu, it's like you can literally be in a shit position, like on bottom side control where they're like cross-facing you. So they're like dropping the shoulder into your jaw and you're pinned to the ground and they're just like grinding onto your face. You learn you have to still be calm and breathe under that literal pressure. Yeah, and when you go through phases like that, and that may go for a minute before you possibly can get out.
Yeah.
And that minute feels like fucking forever.
Yeah.
But when you come out of a class and you've gone through that, when you have some kind of stress from work, like it just feels like nothing because we're getting crushed.
Yeah, true.
And you've learned to breathe and just stay calm. So it's like a literal way of like helping with like anxiety. And you'll probably, if you are in the jiu-jitsu arena, like a lot of people say that it helped a lot with their anxiety. They just learn how to, like your heart rate's up, you're panicking and just learning how to breathe
and stay calm. Yeah, that's really true because you can obviously, a lot of people like have times in their life where there's weeks where they just like struggle to do anything or there's really bad stuff that goes on in their life and it's just like being able to manage your emotions and your stress through those times to not, deteriorate to a point where it can be hard to come back. Because
in that exact same scenario, if you try to like go crazy and spaz out of that position, you exhaust yourself and then you end up getting caught as well. So it's like, that's probably even like another metaphor of not staying calm. Like if you lash out, you're probably going to make your life worse.
Yeah.
So that's like another side of that as well.
Yeah, that's crazy. So, if you had your last meal ever, what is it going to be?
My last
meal ever?
Ramen.
What is it going to be?
100% ramen.
Big ramen guy?
Yeah.
How long, when was your first ramen? When did you have your first ramen?
I used to always like make it.
Has it always been ramen or?
Well, just like noodles. Like I remember like, I would get Maggi noodles as a kid, because I wanted to eat more. So I kind of started lifting when I was like 14, 15. Yeah. And I wanted to get bigger, getting belted around on the footy field. Yeah. So I would normally get like 2 packets of noodles and cook it up and throw in like leftover chicken and some veggies and stuff like that. And that was something that I had always kind of done. It wasn't until I was like an adult I went to like proper ramen restaurants I've actually got some really good soba when I was over in Tokyo.
Oh, yeah. Is that where the best ramen is?
Well, that's from my experience.
Yeah. Yeah, true.
But I haven't traveled the world tasting all the ramens, but that would be a good life.
Start a YouTube channel. That.
Yeah.
That's crazy. So, last question, and it's when you say your younger self, your 18, your 17-year-old self is like sitting next to you, like what sort of advice would you give to him? Now that you've obviously had experience now and everything, what would that younger self need? What sort of advice would he need?
It would be to sit down and plan more.
Yeah,
because I'm more of a doer and fuck around and find out kind of thing. And
that's the best experience, though, right?
Yeah,
that's the best way to learn.
But I've reflected back, and I could have saved myself a lot more if I had just planned and just took a little bit more time. Yeah. Like I'm big for just having a crack and throwing yourself in the deep end, but just planning a little bit more. And it doesn't even have to be a lot of research. Like sometimes I would just have a crack, which I still support. But just if I would plan a little bit more and have better structure, that would go a long way. It would have saved me a lot of time and money.
Perfect. Oh man, thank you so much for coming on. Appreciate you coming on, and obviously grateful for someone like you who's had a lot of experience as well to share your knowledge and what you've been through as well. So I appreciate it. But yeah, thanks for coming on.
Thank you very much.
If you guys haven't subscribed already, subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you're listening on Spotify, leave a review. We want to continue to grow this thing out. So I appreciate you guys for tuning in. But until next time, stay fit, stay vibey.
Ciao.